What is up, golf fans? We are back for another week of bringing in some dough on DFS. As always, I got my trusty partner, Sia Najad, with me. Sia, how you doing?
Me? Oh, wow, that was so sweet. Thank you. I'm doing well. I'm really excited, and I can't decide, Joel, why I'm excited. I think it's because this is a no-cut event. And I don't know if whether people realize this or not. It's like like the pressure's off a little bit in terms of like the stress of Friday, like finding out whether or not like Sergio is going to make the putt or not make the putt, or Corey Connors or whatever chalky guy you think is a good ball striker this week. So I'm kind of excited. I don't know how well you did last week. I made a comeback on Sunday. Again, I only talk about last week because that was also a no-cut event. I made a comeback Sunday, so I didn't do really well, but I kind of broke even. Really did well in my cash builds and did okay in some of my GPPs. But what's interesting about this one, Joel, I'm curious what your opinion is, because last week, if you really wanted a dumpster dive in the 6K range, you're looking at like Rafael Campos or Johannesson or some of these guys that we kind of didn't even really know who they were, or if we did, it was just marginal. Well, in the 6K range here, there's actually some guys, there are some guys that can really kind of go off 2-3 days. I'm just curious, does that give you more confidence going into this week, or less confidence, or the same? It doesn't really matter.
Just different, because you're spot on. There's more guys you can feel good about down there, but there's also more guys at the top that are better golfers. So kind of the same. I think one thing I learned from last week that I'm going to take into this week is a lot can change over the weekend when you get 4 days, right? So, when you don't get 4 days, you're kind of stuck with what you got after, going into Saturday. With 4 days, you can have a guy who's like in last place who could end up being in a winning lineup if he has 2 good days on Saturday and Sunday. So with that being said, let me tee it up a little bit more for us. All right. So what we're doing this week, we got 60 golfers. They're going to be walking in Memphis. That song, I'll be walking. So we're going to Memphis. All right. The tournament.
Yes.
World Golf Classic, FedEx St. Jude. Okay. So it's a little bit different event. Typically the top 50 golfers in the world get invited, and then like winning some big tournaments, some of the more bigger named events, those guys get invited as well. So that's how they kind of rounded out the field. It's not all that big a field. So like Sia said, there's no cut, which makes things a little bit more interesting. And it's a little bit similar thought process, if you will, from roster construction standpoint on a Saturday and Sunday showdown, right? Because we've already had the cut after, and those are the guys left. And now we can just narrow down our pool from there. So just another way to think about it. There are some really good and interesting DraftKings events, unlike last week, which would kind of be more interesting on how we're doing our roster construction and things like that. But with all that being said, it's still going to be about getting 6 guys that compete, right? And even though there's no cut, you'll be alive all weekend. Picking bottom feeders that don't do well, you're not going to be able to cash and make a lot of money. So that's kind of how I'm attacking the week. See, let me ask you this before we dive into things. What are the good course stats, if you will, that kind of stood out for you for this week?
Well, first of all, Joel, the Mark Cohn walking in Memphis reference is really great. For those of you that are too young to know who Mark Cohn is, or just not musically inclined, I literally, after this show, not during it, I want you to YouTube walking in Memphis, and Mark Cohn will come up, and I want you to listen to that song. I would say in my lifetime, there are somewhere in the range of 40 to 60 songs that are literally, I shouldn't say literally, figuratively timeless, where you listen to them in 2021 and they're just as good as when you listen to them in, let's say, 1993. And that, without question, is one of those songs. No matter what kind of music you like, whether it's country or whether it's hard rock or whether it's classical, whatever it is, I'm telling you, anybody who has not listened to that song, please go check it out. It's actually kind of inspiring. The guy's voice is his voice is timeless. It's a really great song. So Joel, I'm so glad you made that reference, because now after the show, I get to go listen to that song. So
we'll see. Before we move on, I will tell you, I have been known to put on my blue suede shoes.
Oh, well, now you
go sing that song in karaoke. Now I don't do it justice, in fairness, but that is.
Oh, this is a real comment. Oh yeah. Do we have any video footage of this that we can put on social media?
No.
We're gonna have to make that happen.
No,
Okay,
hard pass.
everybody watching, which appears to be a number of you at this point. Hello, everybody. Thank you for tuning in. We got Stovey in here, of course. Bobby is in here. He's excellent. In case you're late to the party, what Joel just said, what he just committed to was doing karaoke, specifically the Walking in Memphis song. So he comes down to South Florida sometimes. The last time he was here, he hung out with Michael Vick. So next time he's here, I'm going to make sure I find a karaoke bar, and he is going to fulfill that promise that he kind of, sort of might have implied that he might follow through on. So, okay. So the answer to your question, Joel, in terms of metrics. So a couple things. I think off the tee is important, but I don't think it's super important. I'd like my guys to keep it in the fairway. I think, and as far as the off the tee game, I mean, keep in mind there's a lot of dog legs here. I think you're going to have to dial down on some of these holes, regardless of how long you are off the tee. The par fives, there's only a couple of them, I believe, that they're not super attackable. I think what you really need to hone in on is, some of these recent tournaments we've had, sort of like Wedge Fest, where your second shot's been 125 or in. Here it's really 125 and out. I mean, I think almost 70% of your shots are going to be between 125 and 200. A lot of that 70%, and that's a ballpark figure, it's really between 150 and 200. So if you are the kind of person to kind of narrow down on proximities, I would definitely be taking an extra look at 150 to 175 or 175 to 200, or just 150 to 200 as a whole, because I think that's important. Around the green game, I gave a little bit of a percentage to, nothing major, but you should pay attention to it. For nothing else than the fact that these greens are really small. I mean, the square footage on these greens, it's one of the smaller greens that you're going to have. So having a good ball striker is great, but they're not all going to be landing on the green. So these Bermuda greens, I should say. So I think around the green is important. Putting on Bermuda, if you can kind of see those splits, a lot of guys I like are Bermuda positive, if you will. So we can talk about that later in the show. But approach game, the long irons, that's going to be really important. Bermuda, and, just being a good ball striker in general.
I like it. For me this week, one thing I'm doing pretty differently is my priority above any of the strokes gained metrics is bargain buying, salaries, finding the best golfers. I find with these type of events, I mean, I think last week I'm not counting because it was the Olympics and the course played really easy. So a lot of guys could score, and I think it neutralized the field a little bit. But that won't be the case as much this week. And I do think that the cream are going to rise to the top. Now, that doesn't mean only play the 10K range. Not at all. I actually think there's plenty of value to be found lower. But my thought is finding a way to squeeze in that value. It's almost more important to me to play the value that I like. And then if I can't afford Morikawa, I'll play somebody else maybe at 9K because I got 5 other guys that I really think I'm getting the right numbers on. So that's how I'm attacking this week, less on the strokes gained stuff, because in this field, there's 35 guys that are A golfers or A minus golfers. Right? Every guy here is good. So, we're talking, for me, the way I look at it is we're talking who's slightly striking the ball better this week versus they did the last 2 weeks. It's a moot point. These guys are all going to be good ball strikers for the most part. So I'm going to try and find my edge on just on the salary savings and forming rosters that are at an advantage by, having better players for their price.
Yeah, and I think a big point is to distinguish this from last week, because it really is going to be harder to score. I mean, the scores are going to be vastly different. So, on Saturday and Sunday, when you have your 6K guy in there, like, he better be a guy that can score. And I don't know, Joel, maybe we'll talk about him in the 6K range. I don't know if Ryan Palmer is that sort of ilk or type of golfer. We'll have to talk about guys in the 6K range, because I think no matter what, it is going to be somewhat stars and scrubbish. Even if the scrubs part of your lineup is just one 6K guy, I feel like because of all the stuff up top that you might like in the 9 or 10K, or I guess in Colin's case, 11K range, you're going to have to dip down below. In my opinion, the lineups I've built have all dipped down below like that Harris English range, which is going to be really popular. I think he's 7,400. So it'll be really interesting. I think lineup construction is really interesting. Actually, Koch here, who is a big fan of the show, thank you. And by the way, he was all over Twitter for really good reason. He's giving us props, Joel, among some of the other analysts on Twitter who do a great job. But I think more importantly, as it pertains to him, he's been cashing in cash lineups, I think now 5 or 6 weeks in a row. And I know you don't I mean, Joel, you don't need to do cash lineups. You win like $30,000 every other week or 100,000 or whatever. But I think for most people, bankroll management, and this is what I've been trying to preach this week with some of my friends that might not even be listening to the show, is that, get into some of those 50-50 contests, even if it's not a lot of money, just to see how you fare. If you're picking like a $25 double up and there's 900 people in it, or maybe there's only like 200 people in it, whatever it is, you're really going to want to know, no matter the sport, how you're doing against the field in these 50-50 contests. Because what ends up happening, Joel, is you do these GPPs where only 20 or 21 or 22% get paid, and you might be on the outside looking in on more often than not, because from a probability standpoint, that's what's going to happen. And you think, oh, I'm just not really good at this. I must be doing something wrong. And it's like, well, yeah, you're not perfect at it. But again, only 1/5 of this field is cashing in these tournaments. And for the record, it's really only like 1/10 of that 1/5 that are actually like really cashing. So try to maintain your bankroll the way Koch does it. And here he is chiming in right here. He says 5 weeks in a row and then bankroll management.
Well, let me jump in here. So I think it's important to give some context just on how I'm building for this week too, because it will kind of let you know where my mind's at for when I go through the player pool. As a reminder, not to brag, but I did qualify for the World Championship of Fantasy Golf, which starts this week.
Show off.
The reason why I'm bringing that up is because it is making me do roster construction a little bit differently than normal. And this is why normally, right, I play the big GPPs. I'm swinging for the fences. I'm trying to win a 1% pool and be as the top as I can. For this World Golf Championship for fantasy, the difference is the first week I have to qualify. So there's 250 people. I have to get in the top 100. Whether I'm in first or 100, that doesn't matter. I have to be in the top 100. So I'm not looking to get in first place. I want to have a safe roster that's going to just advance, because my points don't carry over. Once I'll advance the next week and start over. So it's almost like I'm playing a little bit cash-like, because I need to have a roster that's just going to advance, and I want to have my floor be very high this week. So that's how I'm playing this week, which might be a little different than I normally play. And keep that in mind as I'm giving my plays, because it probably will look different than how I would normally attack a week.
That's really interesting. I actually didn't know that started this week. So that's really cool. I'm going to want to monitor that. I know you're not super big on Twitter, but maybe updates in Discord or something like that as each day goes by. I would be really interested to know whether or not you get into that top 100. That's super cool. Bobby, thanks. Hopefully that gave you a laugh. In case for those of you that watch, we try to make you laugh here and there, and we mix in some stats along the way. So hopefully it's a worthy watch. But Joel, I guess that's it from prefacing the tournament. Let's get into it.
Let's dive right into it. And you know what? While we're at it, I'll kick us off this week in the 11,000 and 10,000 range. So, cool. As I was saying, right, my strategy this week is to be a little bit more balanced. I'm actually not taking that stars and scrubs approach, because I want to be able to have a really high floor. So in this top range, there's really only 2 guys I'm targeting, and there's a third that's kind of maybe a maybe in. And I like Brooks a lot. So if you want to play Brooks, I totally am down for that. He tends to rise in these types of tournaments when all the big fish are playing. It gives him a little extra motivation. So Brooks would be the guy at the top I would target, along with the obvious Collin Morikawa, who, the way he's playing right now, it's hard to fan him. Like, probably you have to build at least one lineup with him this week, because he's just playing too well to fade him in a week. So at the top, those are the 2 I'll be looking at. And then the last up top, as somewhere to be different, is probably DJ. And, the early numbers look like he's going to be a little higher owned than I just thought he would have been. And if that ends up being the case, I won't go there. But if he does end up getting closer to 12% or 10% or something like that, I think I want to go back to that DJ well. He tends to do well at these events. He has been playing better, and I think people are going to be turned off by his miscut at the 3M. But before that, he had a few really good results, and I think we can find a DJ, if it's a good ownership number, that would make sense for GPPs this week. Gia, what are you looking at?
Yeah, it makes sense. And it's funny because I have the same 2 plays at the top, and then I sort of have like an ownership leverage play as well that can pop, but it just happens to not be DJ. So let me start with Collin and Brooks Koepka. I mean, we don't really need to sing the accolades of Collin Morikawa, do we? I mean, I can tell you just from looking at, my modeling, he's pretty much number 1 in everything, last 24, last 36 rounds. And when I say pretty much number 1 in everything, I'm actually not being like facetious or sarcastic. Like, You know what, Joel? Let's just take a look at some of the things that he rates out number one in, just so people understand what they're dealing with here. Well, in my model, he ranks number one. So there's your first one. On approach, 125 to 150 proximity, 150 to 175. Ouch, he's 2. Well, that's no good. Let's see. Good drives, number 1. Par 4s, 450 to 500, number 1. Greens in regulation gain, number 1. Now I'm cherry picking. There's some stats where he's not number 1, like the putter, like around the green. Like there are things where he can potentially struggle. But let me give you some perspective on Collin Morikawa. Last week, he lost strokes on approach, which he never, ever does, and still finished tied for 4th. So like consider that. And of course he gained a few with the putter, which he doesn't necessarily do all the time. But if his approach game is even nearly what it normally is, he wins the Olympics by like a lot, in my opinion.
I'll add one more thing to that. I heard a stat on the Golf Channel last week that Collin in college, so he's probably improved since then. This was in college. His 6-iron had a better accuracy than the average tour player's pitching wedge.
Jesus.
So he is just a superior iron player to other golfers, and that's just a fact, right? So we all know the fact with Collin Morikawa is he's not typically known to be a great putter. If he makes putts, he should win every tournament he's in.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. And as far as Brooks goes, I'll tie a bow on that. If he does rise in these types of events, WGCs, majors, of course, he's got a really good track record there. 3 of his last 4 measured rounds, he's gained over 8 strokes ball striking. Of course, ball striking is off the tee and approach combined. Think about that. Over 8 strokes ball striking in 3 of his last 4 measured rounds. It's just so elite. So the only problem with Brooks is he looks to be maybe the highest owned guy in this entire tournament, or it's at least trending that way, where he's like in the 25-ish percentage range, and that's not like great. But again, if you really like Brooks, play him, maybe be overweight on him, maybe get different elsewhere. There are ways to play chalk, but I did want to point that out, that both him and Jordan Spieth look to be super popular. Collin, not quite as much because he's just really expensive. The last guy, and looks like Nick's going to join us in a second, Joel. The last guy I want to mention before we bring Nick on is Rory McIlroy. So the stats don't really speak to me, okay? And I never am on the Rory McIlroy train, but I got to say, sometimes you kind of have to watch a guy to see where he's actually trending instead of looking at the stats. And there was, first of all, he was good last week, but there were so many opportunities that Rory missed last week. First of all, he seemed to be better with the driver, which has been a problem with him. The approach seemed to be there. He gained strokes putting overall at the Olympics from a numbers standpoint, but there was a lot that he left out on the table. And if he had really caught fire, which he very easily could have last week, he really had a shot at winning that tournament or the Olympics, the gold medal as well. So I think people are down on Roy. His ownership is going to be really low. He might not seem like a good course fit. I think it's a really good time to take Rory or to pivot to Rory off one of those really popular guys.
The one thing I will add about Rory is that he does his game tends to do well in terms of just scoring, right? Like even though he might blow up and double bogey, like he gets a lot of birdies and he might finish the day 2 under only, but with 7 birdies and 5 bogeys, that's a good 2 under for DFS. So I will add that portion of it, especially guaranteeing him 4 days.
Nice. Well, let's bring on Nick. So, he just stepped away, but he's going to come on soon. You know what? I guess let's go to the 9K range. We can have him catch up with us, right?
Let's do it. Let's head in. See, why don't you kick us off in the 9K range?
So the problem with this range is it's so rich with talent. I don't even know what to say. I mean, obviously, first of all, Justin Thomas is overpriced. I'm not interested in Justin Thomas. If you want to be contrarian, let's see what his ownership is going to be. I mean, he's in the double digits. He's going to be low owned, though, it looks like. I think Victor Hovland is great, but I think I'm skipping that range because I'm so enamored with a lot of the guys in the 10K range, namely Morikawa and Brooks Koepka. So I might go all the way down towards that Cantlay range. I haven't necessarily come around on Cantlay or Daniel Berger. Cantlay just seems to disappoint me. Although on the first cut yesterday, we were talking to Rick Gaiman, and Cantlay does rate out really well on these courses that have small greens. And when I say real well, I mean really, really well. And obviously his ball striking is great too. So he makes sense. I think I'm more interested in Scotty Scheffler and Paul Casey. The only problem with Scheffler is his ownership appears to be almost as high as Brooks Koepka. So clearly everybody is sort of on the Scheffler train, and as well they should be. His ball striking has been great. His putter can get hot. He's like literally the perfect GPP play. But it's just something to know that he's also going to be really popular. So you could maybe take a safer play to like a Paul Casey, for example, and also avoid some of the ownership. But to answer your question, the guys I like here are probably Scheffler, Casey, and Louis. There's just no argument against Louis at this point, so I'm not going to even pretend to make one. The ball striking is great. That's what I'm looking for. His recent form is great. And I think, and I'm looking now, his tournament history, pretty good. He was 6th here last year, 20th the year before. So that's not bad either. And he's clearly in better form than he was last year and the year before. So he's primed to contend here, in my opinion. Those are my 3 main guys, Joel.
I like that. I'm with you on Louis. I think at this point, I'm taking the opposite approach with Louis as I am Justin Thomas. With Louis, it's like play him until he shows me a reason not to, right? He's competing every week. And Thomas the other way. I can't lose any more money playing him until he gives me a reason to play him. At this point, his game is lost. We haven't seen him playing like we're used to. And at this price, it's just not – like if they had him $1,000 cheaper, I might roll the dice on him and say he could show up. But at this price, you're really relying on him. And he just hasn't shown me anything that I can rely on. So I am out there. I do like Hovland a bit. I think the most interesting thing about Hovland to me, again, is the price. I think he's every bit as good as that top tier, maybe at the bottom of it, but I can build a little bit more bottom-heavy roster with my top guy being 9,700. So I like Hovland, and I think Hovland can get me a top 10, which is a pretty safe, for the way I'm thinking about this cash lineup, and should get me a good amount of points. Now, if you are playing a GPP and you want to look at that for this range, 2 names just to keep an eye on, and let's look at the final ownership before the week's up, are Bryson and Hideki. I like Hideki more because Hideki's been striking the ball really well. And like it always is with Hideki, he's, around the green game and putting can be shaky, but he's been elite striking the ball. And his ownership as of right now doesn't look all that high. Very low. So if you're going to get someone who can be one of the best ball strikers in the field, that low of ownership, sign me up, especially for those big GPPs. And Bryson is really just an ownership play. Listen, we know he's capable of going off in a given week. And let's not forget, I think people are down. He feels like he hasn't been playing well recently. He was playing well at the Open. He blew up on the last day. So it wasn't a bad week. He had like 3 really strong days and a blow up. So I still think there's something there with Bryson. And again, if you're getting another guy who's that good at golf, that low owned, those are the types of guys you want to be targeting in those big GPPs. That's it from the 9K range.
Hey, so I'm gonna bring Nick on, and then Joel, I have a question from you from Andrew in our chat. Nick, what is up, my
boys? Hey, how we doing?
It is.
What's up? How you been? You guys like millionaires yet? Probably.
Well, Joel is.
What's up, guys? How we doing?
Thanks for joining us, man. So we just went through the 10K and 9K range, but before I ask you sort of, Nick, who you like in that range, I do want to bring this question on board here. So Andrew's asking, because this obviously, Joel, this is in the context of you building for the world, for the championship. Do you think, I don't want you to give all your trade secrets away, of course, but do you think you're actually starting that lineup in the 9K range?
Yes. So as of right now, the lineup that I have built is started with my most expensive player is Victor Hovland.
Okay. And so is it going to end up, to Andrew's question, is it going to end up being like a cash game lineup?
The thought process is that yes, because the only way that in my mind that can crush me is if someone like your 25% owned Brooks Koepka wins the tournament and I don't have him. And that means 25% of the field is probably ahead of me. But even if Brooks doesn't win, I think I can be okay without having him. So you just got to make sure one of those really high-owned guys doesn't win. And then I'm good with starting like that with a Hovland and then just making sure I have a floor of all guys in the top 30. I think that's going to cash in most cash lineups.
That makes sense. That's a great answer, I think. So we kind of covered this, Ivan. So let's go around the table. Joel, I'll start with you and then I'll go to Nick. How do you feel about Cantlay as a GPP or a cash game play?
So for Cantlay, the biggest thing for me is ownership, which as what I see now, again, that can all change by Thursday. It's what I would expect for his ownership. It's not that high. It's not that low. It's about, 15, 16%. So if you like him, he can definitely compete. I'm not a big Cantlay supporter. At 9,300, I won't be playing any of him. I think he's the type of guy that when he does well, he'll get you like 12th, which at this price just isn't good enough. So for that reason, like they say in Shark Tank, I am out.
Gotcha. And Nick, is Cantlay going to be in any of your lineups? Is he a play for you?
He is not. He graded. Where is he at here? I'm sorry. I should be. Actually, yes, he will be. I do have him in the top 10. I thought he was like damn near close to 20th. But no, I don't love the ownership. I have it right around 15 to 20%. I haven't really dove into ownership, and definitely wait for the article on Win Daily to get that, because those are probably the most accurate in the industry. I don't love them. I don't hate them, but I think at like 15, 20%, I'm okay with that.
Yeah, there are some guys that rate out really well in my model that I just kind of ignore because I'm not feeling it. And I think intuition should play a part. I don't think it should be just 100% model based. I say that because Cantlay is number 6 in my model, and I'm just not feeling. I am feeling the price. I think it's a value at that price. I think he could be successful here, but for me, I just think there's too many guys around him that I think have more upside. So if I play 20 lineups, is he going to be in 2 of them? Probably, but no more than that. It's not a guy that I'm going to be like, oh, I can't wait to play Cantlay this week. So, and Nick, I kind of wanted to kick it back to you because we sort of missed you on the 10K and 9K range. Can you just kind of real quick tell us who you like playing in those ranges?
Colin, Rory, Louis.
Nice.
And Hideki. I like Hideki again. And
okay. So Joel, if you remember, we said all of those guys, and we only said a couple beyond that. So It sounds like we're all on the same page here.
I think we were on like 6 guys, and those were 4 of the 6.
Exactly.
All right, real quick then, because I missed. Are you guys on Bryson or no? He is so low in my model. It's like almost like there's an error with it, but his ownership is like kind of hard. That's the intuition you're talking about here. My model says no. My heart's telling me yes, even though I don't like Bryson at all.
I mentioned him as a strictly GPP play based on ownership.
Okay.
Yeah.
That is the only mindset you could possibly have with it, right?
And it's one of those things where like in a single entry or a 3 max, he's just not going to be anywhere near that for me. So, I mean, if you're playing an MME or something, having a couple shares or a few shares makes sense. But I mean, forget about like, again, this goes back to modeling and eye test. He doesn't pass either of them. So it's kind of one of those things where, yeah, he makes sense as a purely contrarian play if the ownership is low. Outside of that, I don't see it.
Can I sell the world on Hideki real quick?
Please.
So his iron play has been absolutely unbelievable recently, and the only thing that is grading negatively, which is something I did not weight very heavily in my model at all this week, is putting. So see, he's gone. Where'd he go? Yeah, all right, bye, see ya. But Joel, all right, thoughts in, because that is pretty much right where I'm at right now. Is that Hideki graded out as the number 2 upside play for me with iron play for most proximities. It is a target golf course in my opinion, so I feel like that's also something he should excel in, because that's kind of how. That's usually when he plays really well. It's kind of how he played at the Masters. He's not a bomber by any means or anything like that. It's more of where is the ball landing once you hit it, and he's very good at that. So assuming the putting doesn't matter much based on the metrics that we all gathered, unless you guys have a different thought, I think Hideki is an absolute, or Hideki, everybody makes fun of me for saying Hideki. But yeah, he's one of my favorite plays, and right now he's one of the lowest owned players in the field that is above 7K in pricing. So to me, that's just like an absolute no-brainer. He'll be locked in for me everywhere.
I just gave the exact same breakdown.
Sorry for wasting everybody's time.
The exact same thing. I said, like, he's one of the best ball strikers in the field. He's going to be low owned. His only weakness is putting, which, is something we usually overweight here. And at this ownership with the guy who's striking the ball as well as him, it's hard to fade him.
Boom.
So we have a fan of the show here. She's in our Discord as Yamazaki, I believe. She's recently a $10,000 winner, not in PGA, but in LOL of all places. So the question is, which golfers are really going after those ranking points this tournament? So she's talking about the FedEx Cup rankings. It's a decent question. I mean, there are some guys, and I don't know how much you think about this. I think Nick's taking a call, but it's one of those things where, like, Adam Scott, for example, is in this tournament, and he's sort of on the outside looking in. He needs to, or he's like right on the line, and he needs to do well here. And it's like, all right, well, does that mean Adam Scott's going to do well? And I'm usually all about the narratives, only if in practice they've borne out before, or if there's something telling me like, oh, well, he's really dialed in, or he left early, like Sung J M did and Siwoo Kim to go to the Olympics, which, by the way, that wasn't a narrative I was on. I didn't play either of those guys. But the point is like, is there something that makes sense of the narrative outside of like, chasing the points? Are they playing well? So the answer to your question, I think, is I don't think I'm really interested in looking that. That's something we can dive into. Joel, have you looked at that?
So here's my stance on that. I think it's kind of similar to yours in that I think if this was a less loaded field and it was like one of those JV tournaments where there's a couple of guys and a guy needed to put up a place to get into this, to the official, tournaments and things like that, I would be more inclined. But with all the great golfers in this field, it's not out there to be had. It's not like these guys are too good. You have to play your best golf no matter what. I don't think the extra motivation, if you need extra motivation, you're not good enough to begin with. So I don't think that's something I'm going to factor in here. That's just the type of narrative I would plug into like a JV tournament where it's hard to find the low end guys and things like that, but not in this type of field now.
Yeah, I will say that Fleetwood and Rose are on the outside looking in. There's not a lot of guys that are like really on the line. There's, you got to be in the top 125 to make that first round of the playoffs. And most of the guys that are on that line are not invited to this tournament because frankly, they're not really good enough to be here. So it's not something I'm going to be. It's a good question, by the way, because it is the FedEx Cup playoffs and people want to qualify for that, but I'm not really looking at it. And then, here we go. I'm always going to play compliments here. Yamazaki says, love seeing Sia and Joel every week and bonus awesome seeing Sticks in here. Have a great show. Catch up later. So Joel, I guess we covered the 9K range, didn't we?
We did. Let's just jump into the 8K range. I can kick us off here. I think there is some definite interesting value down here in the 8K range. But my stance with the 8K range is I think there's a lot of guys in the 7K range that are interchangeable with this 8K range. And so for me, I'm just finding those pivots where I can get that salary savings and build more balanced lineups doing so. If I am going to target some guys in this range, some guys that I find interesting are Matthew Fitzpatrick. I do think he's a little overpriced, though, for this field. Mm-hmm. Abraham Answer and Cameron Smith. But for the most part, I do actually prefer the 7K range for value.
Yeah, that makes sense. I like a few 8K guys here. Some quite a bit. Unfortunately, it looks like, and I'm looking at ownership right now. Actually, they're not as chalky as I thought they'd be. So I think I'm going to skip over Matt Fitzpatrick, even though I think he's a decent play. He certainly looks overpriced. I was going to play Webb Simpson if he was going to be really low owned, but it looks like everybody thinks, hey, this is too low of a price for Webb Simpson. So people are playing him, playing the upside. Maybe he catches the former Webb Simpson. I do like Abraham Answer quite a bit. I like Corey Connors a little bit. I don't know if it's enough to play him, but I think Answer, if we're talking, there was somebody in Discord that wanted us, and we'll cover it more later, but wanted us to cover like cash game builds versus like GPP builds. For me, Answer feels like kind of like a cash game lock for me. In GPP, it doesn't look like his ownership is super high. So I think you can play him in both, but the ball striking is there, and that's what I'm looking for. He's really kind of good across the board. He rates out really, really well in my model. So those are the two guys in this 8K range. Again, I think I'm off of Webb, but I think it's Answer and maybe Connors. But the Connors short game worries me, so I'm not really sure what to do with him.
And before we pass the one guy that I missed out of mine in this range is Lowry. Lowry's been on a tear. He's been striking the ball really well. And he's another guy that maybe for me a little overpriced, but the way he's playing, he's the one that I might find a way to get into my lineups. But Nick, who do you like here in this 8K range?
8K range. Can I put Paul Casey in there just because he ranks?
Right, you came in late, so that counts. Yeah, for sure.
All right, perfect. All right, Paul Casey for sure. In the 8K range, I do like Corey Connors. I do agree with exactly what Sia said. The short game's a little bit alarming, but with how good of a ball striker he is, I kind of have to ride that narrative if I'm on Hideki for the same reason. And then, honestly, no one really graded out like that well. Finau, I can't do it. Let me actually pull up where he was graded here. He was outside the top 20 for me, so I'm a hard pass there. I like Corey Connors, Cam Smith. I'm interested in Fleetwood, I think, but his game just really hasn't been there. I think it's more of just an intuition play that he was talking about earlier. And that's really it. Shane Lowry, Cam Smith, and Corey Connors are the only three people that I will be playing in the 8K range. Sorry, Patrick Reed, but I'm not doing it.
I like it. And I'm excited because I think by the vibe I got of us kind of breaking down this range, it sounds like we're all kind of in agreement that there's just similar value to be found in the 7K range to help us build better
Yeah.
lineups. So let's dive into it. Where is that value? Who are those guys that, in my opinion, like I said before, there's plenty of guys in the 7K range that I thought could have been priced in the 8K range and wouldn't have blinked an eye. So let me just go play those guys and build balanced roster. So Nick, let's start with you. Who do you like down in the 7K range?
Only 2 guys again. So, well, I guess, yeah, I mean, it is 2 guys. It is Jason Koch, and his ownership it's 15% right now is what I'm seeing. I hope to see like maybe 10 to 12 range, but with Hideki and Cam Smith that I'm on so much, I think I'll get different just with those 2. But Sergio Garcia, sorry, I absolutely love him. No matter how I graded my model with like changing the weights for upside safety, Sergio was top 8 every single time, and the average was 6.25. So closer to the top 5 for me than the top 10, which is absolutely scary. But again, if with how I'm grading ball striking and off the tee, Sergio should absolutely ball out here. He's really good around the green. Same reason I like Cam Smith. They're kind of the same player for me with different prices. So I am very all in on Sergio. And then Jason Kokrak just kind of lit up everything in my model. He grades out 13th overall. For a guy that we really haven't talked about, probably having the best year of his PGA career, hasn't really been, an absolute star recently, but at 7,800 in a no-cut event, like we just need him to get to the top 20 range. And just price discrepancy there, he just shows up as a huge value for me on my DFS side.
I love it. I'm with you on that. So yeah, who are you looking at here?
Yeah, I like Jason Kokrak a lot as well. And I know we've talked about him a little bit over the last few weeks. Joel, you had him. Did you have him in the lineup that won the 100,000?
Oh yeah.
Wow. So
there you go. You got to play him now.
Well, in for the record, that lineup was really kind of a half a point away from winning $1 million. But whatever, we can rehash that another time. But no, I like Kokrak. I like a lot of chalk, unfortunately, here. So I like Harris English a lot. In fact, I've already put an outright on him. He's ranging anywhere between 35 to 1 because it's been bet down to 50 to 1, depending on where you got the number and when you got the number. The ball striking is so good. If you look at his last 5 measured rounds, he's gained in ball striking in all 5. Okay. His last 6 measured rounds, he's gained in around the green, and he's gained putting in 5 out of the last 6 measured rounds. And so what I'm telling you is literally in the last 6 measured rounds, he's pretty much gained in every department, every tournament, with the exception of like 1 or 2 times where he didn't gain, around the green or with the putter. So he's got the complete game. And in a course like this, where the scoring's not going to be off the charts and you're really just going to have to manage the course day to day, a guy with an all around the game like this is somebody I'm looking for, which by the way is why he's one of the more popular guys on the slate. So this is one of those where, do you want to eat 7K chalk? Typically you don't, because 7K chalk is typically a disaster. But then again, this is a different field. It's a different event. It's 7Ks in this particular tournament are not your like true 7Ks. They're not like the Harold Varner IIIs or the Sam Burnses of the world that are typically kind of the chalky guys in a regular tournament in the 7K range. So I'm willing to play Harris English in GPP, but I definitely think he's like a cash game lock. Tyrell Hatton's another guy, like only because of his price. He's looking to be a little popular, so that worries me a bit. Well, again, we'll wait for Steven's ownership article, but he's a guy with plenty of upside. The thing is, he's missed 2 cuts in a row, but those were both at majors. Prior to that, he played the Palmetto, and believe it or not, at the Palmetto, he gained 11.75 strokes ball striking. So, and that's maybe that's an outlier, but what I'm telling you is this elite ball striker who has not been elite was elite recently. It was just last month, and then he's missed 2 cuts since then. At 7,400, I just think he's such a bargain. So those are the 3 guys I like. I like Hatton, I like English, and I like Kokrak the best here.
And one thing to add, just not forget, from an ownership standpoint, it's a smaller field. So the ownership's going to be higher across the board just because there's less guys to choose from. Mm-hmm. So if you see a guy that you're turned off because he's 20%, really 20% should feel more like a 15% on a regular week just because there just aren't as many guys to choose from. So Keep that in mind. Now in the 7K range, the good news is I'm on pretty much the same guys. And there's a reason why they're high owned. There's a reason why they just seem like they're mispriced. So Kokrak, I love. He's definitely going to be in where he was. He's as of right now, he's in my main lineup. Harris English, also another guy that it just makes a lot of sense this week, right? He's a guy that's playing really well. He's 7,600, really affordable. Hatton also on. So again, same guys. The only guy that you guys didn't mention that I'm going back to the well on is Brian Harman. Brian Harman has been having a great season. He's like, Brian Harman's not the sexy pick, right? He doesn't do things that are going to pop off the page, but he's consistent. He doesn't make many mistakes. And I think that's what's keeping his ownership right now not that crazy, because no one looks at Brian Harman like, I got to get Brian Harman in my lineup.
Mm-hmm.
And I think this was a narrative that Sia often brings up, where it's like, when someone's name is, and I don't know if this is the exact example you use, but someone's name is like Bob Smith, right? Like the average Joe name people overlook because they're just the average Joe and they don't have that fun excitingness about them. And that's kind of what Brian Harman is. But that's fine by me. He's consistent. He has been showing up week in and out. Even his most recent missed cut, it was like a 70 and a 71. He didn't blow up. He didn't have a bad day. He just like barely missed the number. So I think Brian Harman's someone who's actually getting overlooked, and I will be overweight on him this week. But I also agree with you guys. I like Sergio Garcia. And I think the other guys, I'd be okay if someone wanted to take a shot on Sung J M. If someone in a GPP wanted to go nuts and try something with Will Zalatoris, a GPP only, this is not a cash play. But Will Zalatoris, we saw compete in some of these bigger events. He hasn't been playing as well, but at this price, you can roll the dice on a bigger field and see if he can get you something. So I really like this 7K range. I think we can get some value here. But let's wrap it up down in the 6K range. Sia, who do you like down there?
So I'm hoping you guys can help me with this range. There's a few guys that I've noted that I like. I was in our chat talking about one guy who's literally 6,000, like bottom of the barrel pricing. And I talked about him on the first cut yesterday too with Rick, and his name is Jim Herman. So I don't necessarily want help with him. And what I want help with is I'm going to give you a few names, and I'm not necessarily sure I'm in love with any of the three. So I'm kind of hoping you guys can sort of give me maybe a few more names to contend with. I do like Jim Herman though. So first of all, he hits fairways. He's got a solid long iron game, which is what you're looking for here. And that's led to 4 top 30s in a row. So it's just, let's say that again, because he's 6,000. He is literally the lowest price guy. And not only has he made 4 cuts in a row, but he's been within the top 30 4 tournaments in a row. He's also gained in ball striking and in putting in 5 tournaments in a row. Okay, I'm going to say that again. Jim Herman has gained in ball striking and also, in addition, he has also gained in putting for 5 tournaments in a row. So again, I know this is, you're looking for upside here, and you're looking for guys who can really score. And maybe he's not like the big scorer, but he has been finishing top 30, and we see the ball striking metrics. To me, this is a misprice because, Joel, of what you said, because of name recognition. I mean, I'm not saying he should be 7,500, but I'm saying if this guy had a really cool name like Bryson or Brooks or something like that, he'd probably be like, I don't know, 6,800. I think you're getting value here.
Interesting. Anyone else in the 6K range?
So Stuart Sink and let's see, Stuart Sink. He's hit a rough patch, but I do like him, and I think he grades out pretty well for this course. And Ryan Palmer is sort of my long shot, who has not been playing well, but I think he's a guy with potential that can really kind of light it up if he finds his game again. Those are the 3 guys that I've considered so far.
I like that. Nick, who are you looking at down there?
I do like Ryan Palmer. He actually grades out 33rd overall in my model. I wish I could tell you why, but I haven't looked into his numbers real quick. 1 second. Yeah, I mean, the only negative thing that he's doing out on the golf course is around the green, and it's very minimal. So I think that's something you can kind of negate, or if the putter gets high, you can kind of hide that. So I do like Ryan Palmer a lot at that ownership with how good of a year he's been having. I know his game, like Sia said, it's not where it needs to be as of late. But I have to play KH Lee. It's a TPC property. The guy is just a walking top 30 finish at TPC properties. So I like him a ton. And then Max Homa actually rated out very, very high for me. A guy that used to be chalking a couple tournaments ago, and then no one's really played him since. I know he had a kind of rough patch, but his game's starting to get back to form. So I do like Max Homa. He is 24th for me overall. So on a DFS price perspective, that was a huge value for me. So that's pretty much it. I'm kind of going to avoid the 6K range as much as possible, but if I'm jamming in that much Morikawa, it's going to be hard to not have to play 1 or 2 of these guys.
I hear that, and I'm not going to be too heavy down in this range either myself. I will throw a few names out there, some guys that I think can just compete this week. I am going to start from the bottom of the range when I'm going looking at my plays. And the first name I'm going to throw out there is an interesting one. It's Garrick Higo. Now, Garrick Higo has been on a cold streak. He's not coming in the best form. But at 6,300, that is a really, really low price. So if you want to get interesting, if you're trying to build a lineup with Brooks and Colin Morikawa or something like that, you'll probably need to dive pretty low. And if you're going to dive low, let's not forget, Higo, won 3 tournaments this year, 2 on the European Tour in a row, and then came to the U.S. and won the Palmetto. He has since fallen off. He has missed a few cuts. He hasn't been playing great, but we know the upside is there. And for 6,300, I think that's just a good number at what, from looking now, almost zero ownership. So from a GPP perspective, that could be interesting. I'm with KH Lee. I learned, these are the types of courses he excels at. And it's like, it's not the type of thing you want to, like, a narrative that you want to follow, but it's the truth. I mean, I've won money from it multiple times, and at this point, it's working out. So I'll go away from it when it doesn't work. Right now, it's working. So I will be playing some KH Lee as well. I'm with you with Stuart Sink. He has kind of hit a bit of a cold streak, but Sink has been playing great this year. His ball striking's been good. I think Palmer's interesting at this price. And then the last name I want to throw out here the last two are Sam Burns, who just graded out well for a guy in the 6K range. And an interesting one is Kevin Kisner. Kevin Kisner's been playing well recently. He's the type of guy that kind of is like the surprising guy in these types of events. Like, oh, who would have thought Kevin Kisner would compete here? But he is. He's a guy that competes, and at this price is someone that you can use to make those more top-heavy creative lineups if you choose to do so.
Yeah, and the last 2 times here, he's been top 30. That's not great, but it's not bad at all. 25th and 27th. He was a guy I was considering. I actually, Nick, because you arrived a little late, I'm curious because you mentioned you're putting somewhat of an emphasis off the tee. Is distance paramount for you this week?
No, not really. Just because the proximities, I think people just need to hit fairways, get their second shot where it needs to be, and you're good to go.
Exactly. And honestly, that's exactly what we said at the front end of the show before you got here. So does that mean you think a guy like Kisner is in play?
His irons have been pretty bad, though.
Yeah.
So that's the only thing for me is like his approach graded pretty negatively. Let me look at just the last 30 days for Kisner just to see if it's starting to trend upward. It's certainly, I mean, his last 30 days, his approach has actually been awesome. The last 6 months, it's been negative. He's lost strokes there. But I guess if you're playing recent form, yeah, absolutely. He's fine. He's barely lost any strokes off the tee. And if distance doesn't really matter, his tee to green is really damn good. So I do like the Kisner call there.
Love it.
And it just seems like just the intuition thing again. Like a guy like Kisner just seems safe to me because he's a good pedigree golfer. That's something that matters to me, and especially if it's not a long course. It's only 7,200 yards. That's not too bad. He should be just fine.
Yeah, and he's doing a lot lately. If you look at the last 12 rounds, he's second in this field putting, which again, I don't know if that's a positive or a negative. It's just something to point out. The long irons are a little concerning, but they're not bad to your point, Nick. So he grades out again, 12 rounds is not typically what I look at. 24 rounds, he was a little lower, but 12 rounds, he's 26th in this field. So, you're looking for upward trajectory. And I think Kisner is kind of a sneaky play. I don't mind that at all.
I love it. I think we uncovered a lot of good value here. As always, I think, at the top, there's a lot of good golfers to pick from, but there is some value to be had this week. We talked about a lot of those guys. So I'm excited about that, but we're not done yet.
We do have a couple questions too. There's some good ones if you don't mind. I'm going to pull up a couple.
Let's hit the question.
I think you hit Hatton, right? We're good there.
Yeah.
I guess that's a pretty good question. I'll kind of let you guys, or maybe Joel, if you want to take the reins here because you've just been on absolute fire.
Yeah, so ownership and is a complete GPP play, right? Like if you're playing a cash game, I don't even consider ownership. Play the guys that you want to play. If you're playing a smaller tournament, ownership a little less important. It's not going to be too many duplicate lines. You're just going to get the best team. If you're going after the biggest tournament of the week, that's where you need to get different, right? If you want to play the most popular players in the biggest tournament of the week, you have to be so perfect. It's going to be really hard to win. So it's almost better where it's like, hey, if someone who's really low owned, plays well this week, which like for some of these guys might not even be a surprise. It's just not the popular pick. Now you've differentiated yourself in this field, and now you have a chance of actually beating hundreds of thousands of people where you won't if you're just playing all the same guys everyone else is playing. So ownership is really it's more of a style of play and what types of tournament you're playing than it is anything else.
Yeah, and I think you want to like in your single entries, and I don't, Joel, you might have said this. I was looking at something else because I want to play a really quick game with you guys that sort of has something to do with this question. In the single entries, they function similarly to cash games where you don't need to get that different. But in the bigger tournaments, like Joel is talking about, the only way you're going to win those probably is if you're different in more ways than one. But here's the game I want to play. I wrote down 8 guys that are, in my estimation, the 8 guys that are probably going to be the most chalky in this tournament. Okay. We don't have the final numbers out. Win Daily will have that tomorrow. It'll be all over windailysports.com and in our Discord. But so here are 8 guys that Nick, I'm going to go to you first, and then I'm going to go to Joel. I'm going to go one by one. And this is just in the context of GPPs. So tournaments, let's say average to large size tournaments. I'm going to say the name, and you're going to say whether you would take them in a GPP or good chalk or bad chalk, essentially.
Just in or out, huh? All right, I like
in
this
or out.
game.
Yeah, are you willing to play this chalk, or are you just no way? I'm not interested. So
just
let's
would you or would you not? Right, the good old college game. We've all been there, right?
In a much different context, exactly. So okay, so let's start at the top. Not the very top, because Colin's not really that chalky, but right next to him is Brooks Koepka. So Nick, I'll start with you. Brooks, are you willing to play that chalk or no?
I'm out. No, 30%, damn near. I'm out. Just on principle, can't do it.
Joel?
So he's not Christian McCaffrey.
He's in my lineups now, but I agree. If I'm looking at 30% by go time, I will be out.
By the way, thank you, Nick, because we're already pumping out the content for the NFL. And Joel, I should say, Nick has his 80 model. These are things to kind of live by from a prop standpoint and a DFS standpoint. So we have a lot of really great things. Get in the NFL Discord and just kind of listen in, whether it's us listening to us on Sirius or on our YouTube feeds. We have a lot that's going on now, but also a lot coming with all of us, like all 3 of us plus 10 other people that are involved in the Win Daily Sports NFL team. Okay, next guy, Jordan Spieth. Good chalk or bad chalk? Are you in or out?
In. I could he's an around the green magician. I like him a lot.
Out.
All right. Louis Oosthuizen, in or out?
In, double in, triple in.
In.
Daniel Berger, in or out?
He grids well, but I'm going to be out.
Out.
Scotty Scheffler.
Out.
In.
Harris English.
So out.
In.
Jason Kokrak.
In.
Now, Kokrak isn't looking like mega chalk yet, but I'm just, he's up there. Corey Connors, also a guy that's not mega chalk yet, but might get there.
He's a ping player. I'm in.
Out if it's mega chalk.
Okay, I'm going to do this real quick. I'm just going to go over it for my answers. And again, these are all assuming these are really chalky guys. It's not that I don't like them. It's that I'm probably not interested in playing them in a GPP. That's what these answers are for. Brooks Koepka, if he truly is in that 30% range, I think I might have to be out as well. Spieth out, Louis in, Berger out. Scheffler, I liked. He's in my initial picks article, but I got to be out. I didn't anticipate his ownership was going to be that high when I wrote that article. So Scheffler out. Harris English in. I'll play the 7K chalk reluctantly. Jason Kokrak probably in. Corey Connors probably out.
I want to add one thought process to this. For me, and I wouldn't agree with that, but one of my thought processes with chalk is I'm more okay with eating, and I know this is what most people actually disagree with, the 7K chalk in a field like this because of value and because, the pivot in the 10K range is another great golfer. Mm-hmm. The pivot in the 7K range is like, I don't know how that person's going to do this week. So I'd rather pivot up top to another great golfer that would be lower owned to pivot in the 7K range, which to me is a bigger question mark. And
that's why you have to contextualize every tournament differently, because you're right. I hate taking 7K chalk, but just like I said with, the Harold Varner III 7K chalk, this is a different tournament. So it's not really the same. Could it blow up in your face? Yeah, I guess, even though it's a no-cut event, but it's not the same assessment with your Harris Englishes and Jason Kokraks versus the guys that we're normally associating with 7K chalk.
Agreed.
That's fair. All right, I'm on English now. You guys win.
I love it. That was a good exercise. See, thank you.
Yeah, I think we should do that maybe weekly. I think I think people want to hear what. And by the way, all those guys, at least most of them, are good for cash games. So that's something to keep in mind. Let's get to this question before we go to the outrights and in the first round leaders. So this is a core question. We had this in Discord. It might be the same person. If you're doing a 20 max, Nick, I'd like to start with you and then go to Joel. If you're doing a 20 max, are you stuck, or I shouldn't say stuck, are you willing to do a core of 3 or 4 throughout all 20? Are you doing 10 and 10? And is it 3 or 4? What do we do?
Me personally, and I think Joel's probably the best guy to answer this just for DFS golf. And NFL, I probably have a different answer, and I'll stand by that with anybody. But for golf, my core is usually 15 lineups of 4 guys. My core is always 4 people, core 4, just, whatever. I don't want to be gimmicky there, but it's usually the 4 guys. And right now, I could say those 4 guys too. It doesn't really matter, but that I do 15 lineups with those. And then I try to do 5 lineups that kind of hedge against those for the most part. And there's so like my core is ownership based too. So like those 15 lineups are probably going to be relatively low aggregate ownership. And then I'll try to play like 5 lines that are a little more chalky, and then maybe mix 1 or 2 of the core in if they fit, just because I do like going more all in on golfers as the years gone by. And I kind of took a page out of Joel's book. When I first started doing 150 max, I had like 55 to 60 guys in my field, and some of those lineups, like damn near half of them are fighting each other. Mm-hmm. And that's just something that you're either getting first or you're not doing anything. I want all my lineups to go towards the pay line, or I'll go the other way and we'll just regroup next week. So long answer, long. I try to get a core in as much as possible, but in a 20 max, I do want to hedge out 5 a little bit, just because all you're trying to do in a 20 max is get first place for the most part. In these 150s, I just want them all to get across the pay line, or 100 of them, and then see what happens with first place, because a 150 max tournament is just such a big field. It's kind of, you're not saying you're playing it to win it. Obviously, we'd love to win it, but the odds of it are so slim to none.
My biggest recommendation, I say this all the time: never play this guys in every lineup. Never, ever. Because here's why. I've had this happen to me plenty of times where, I was wrong on my top guy and he missed the cut and he wasn't any good, but my 2 through 7 was aces. And so now I lose every time because my top guy was in every lineup, right? So if you pick a core of 10 guys, even if your 6 through 10 are really good, right? As long as you don't hammer everyone into a lineup, you can still win a lot of money by just making sure your 6 through 10 have lineups without some of the top guys that maybe you missed on. So none of us are perfect. We can't read this tournament perfectly and pick the exact best golfer every time. So my recommendation is, if you're doing it the process right and you're picking a good field of guys to play, don't go all in on anyone. Even the guy you like the most, you're better off just playing your field more generally and hoping that hits in general.
So real quick, Joel, would you say your max exposure then is 70% or 80? I'm right at 80. So I guess maybe that's a better answer to Norton's question here, is like, what's your max exposure in a tournament like that?
I would answer the question differently for 20 lineups than I would 150. So that's
sure
2 different things. For 20 max, I would say 70 is probably the right number, 60 or 70, maybe even 80, because you're only playing 20 lineups. For 150, my max is, and I don't even get to the max every time, is 40. I would try to not go above 35% for one player.
Yeah, okay. I figured that's kind of exactly where I'm at. That's why I said that 15, because my 20 max, I'm like 75 to 80% max.
Yeah. Yep.
Cool. Well, that was a good question, by the way.
Yeah, really good question.
Cool. And then the last I see, Nick, when you go to Myrtle.
I would love to go to Myrtle Beach, man. I've never been to Myrtle Beach. I've gone all over South Carolina. My dad actually used to work there. Not been Myrtle Beach, but I think it was wherever Clemson's at. It was right by there. So I've been there, but I've never been to Myrtle Beach. So I would love to do that. And I obviously love to play golf. So that would be fun.
So I'm not going to Myrtle, but I'm not going too far, actually, tomorrow to Bermuda. And the reason I'm going, as I told Sia before the show, is because the grass at this tournament is Bermuda. So I want to check it out at the real authentic place just to make sure, so I can see how the guys are going to putt this week. So I'm doing this for the fans. For you guys.
This is real good field work here.
I mean, Joel is so into Win Daily Sports PGA golf, and he's made so much money that he was actually able to receive a grant to actually study all of the greens. So he's starting in Bermuda and he's going from there.
It's a media pass. Nice work, man.
Yeah. So stay tuned. I'll let you guys know how it goes and give you some more information before next week's tournament. Is there any more questions we didn't touch on?
Three max real quick in comparison to the 20 max.
So with a 3 max, it's so small that if you wanted to go all in on somebody like that, I could see, just because it's only 3 lineups. Like you're not really. I mean, that to me, right? I almost look at 3 lineups like it's equivalent of playing for me mentally 1, where if I want my bottom 2 guys just mismatch, I'll play the same 4 and 3 and mismatch the bottom 2, something like that. Actually, it's only 3, so 3 max. Yeah, you can do it like that if you'd like. And then for ownership, the way I look at ownership is, if you're going to play some of these super chalky guys that are 25, 30%, and you want to get 1 or 2 of them in there, totally fine. Just counter that with somebody under 10%, right? And then that should neutralize what you're doing. I don't necessarily try to pretzel my brain into figuring out what the total number of my lineup is. I'm just looking at, if I'm playing some super chalky guys, get some low end guys to even it out.
Yeah, and I think if you're doing the 150 max, Steven has a formula that he talks about in Discord almost weekly in terms of like what your percentage should be, and that's pretty fruitful. But like with respect to the single entries and the 3 maxes, you don't need to worry about it too much. Just if you're going to go chalky with 2 or 3 guys, just make sure you're hitting a guy that's like a secret weapon, for example, or a 5 to 10% guy, and you should be okay.
Yep, I totally.
Before we get to the outrights, this is an interesting question, because I agree with this. I mean, I think this is something to be said for if you want to play a chalky guy. I mean, obviously, I want to kick it to you, but I do agree with the idea that and this works for, we do this sticks in the NFL too, where, everybody's going to be on Kyler Murray one week. It's like, all right, that's cool. If he's going to be 30%, I'm going to play him in 6 or 7 out of 10 lineups. And so I'm just overweight on the field, over leveraging the field. Is that something, Joel, that you do in golf if you really like a guy and you just want to play him?
So no. Back to my original reason and a few of them. One, even who does play 150 lineups, right? There's guys that are going to be more overweight than me, so I'm still not going to get an edge. There's guys that might play 150 or 100, which I'm never going to do, and I don't want to do. So the other reason being, guys in golf especially, like I would even say football, there's guys that are just like, listen, this is the worst run defense in the league, and you're the best running back in the league. There is this guy is going to have a good game.
That's a great point. Because football, you can predict volume. There's things you can predict. You can predict how many carries a running or touches a running back's going to get.
Yeah, golf's a volatile sport. Much more volatile sport is a good way to summarize it, right?
Yeah.
Right. And yeah.
It's the same thing I said before. If it's that one guy that everyone loves this week that just has a bad week or pulls his back on withdrawals, and the rest of your roster was lights out and you went too overweight on him, your whole week's ruined, and that shouldn't be the reason you lose the week. So I won't let that. I've gotten burned doing that before, and that will not be a reason I get burned again.
Yeah, and that is a really important distinction. I mean, I think you still could do that with Brooks if you wanted to, but it is a really important distinction between doing DFS in general with golf and doing it with the NFL. There's a lot more predictability from a touches and a volume standpoint and a matchup standpoint. Like you're actually you might be the third wide receiver on a team, but you're matched up against the slot corner who's terrible. Like there are things that you can kind of see before they even happen in sports like the NFL, where you can't necessarily judge that in golf DFS.
Echo.
Cool.
Good stuff, guys. These were good questions this week. Keep bringing the heat in the questions, because this is great stuff, and we want to answer the questions that you guys have. So thank you for doing that and posting your questions in the chat here. But before we wrap up today, let's hit some first round leaders and some outrights. This is where we are going to punch some big money tickets, and we'll start with Sia. Who do you like in the outright market?
So I only put 4 down here. I mean, I do think that whoever wins this is probably going to be 50 to 1 or lower, but that's not really super fun. So instead of picking 5 or 6, I just went with 4. Rory at 22 to 1. I don't love it, but I do think Rory at a 22 to 1 number is value, especially if he pops like I think he might really soon. Harris English, listen, if you're looking on DraftKings, it's 35 to 1. It's not really worth it. But if you were able to get him at 45 to 1 or 50 to 1, or if you can see it at that number, 40 to 1, still probably not the best value, but I think 45 would make sense if you could find it. Tyrell Hatton, 55 to 1. Listen, if he was in good form, this would actually be a good course fit for Tyrell Hatton. And I know he's done it before. Yeah, it's been about a year. But we know even at the Travelers, he gained almost 12 strokes ball striking. So he has it in him. And I think 55 to 1 is a big number. And then Jason Kokrak at 60 to 1, because Jason Kokrak is a winner on the PGA Tour, literally and figuratively.
I like it. Nick, who are you looking at?
Sergio, 60 to 1.
I like that
it.
too.
That's it. He's calling it right there.
You guys
Pin
have been-
placements will be easy. He won't have to worry about the putter. He's going to be in the clubhouse, round 1 leader.
Real quick though, is when you say pin placements will be easy, is there anything to that, or you're just kind of making?
No. I hope the first day they're easy. That I don't know anybody at the course that has insider information. But if you guys know somebody out there, that would be cool to know where the pin placements are at. Yeah, because these greens do have some modulation that certainly will a lot of rounds will play differently. So if it's a second shot course, pin placement matters, I guess, a lot on this course. In my
And what did you think? What number did you get for Sergio?
60.
Wait, this is outright, by the way. These are the outrights, right?
Outright, I got 70 to 1 on DraftKings.
70, yeah. So we got 70 to 1. I like that number. But you guys have made a great mistake.
I do have Paul Casey as well, and JT is my outrights. Those are the 3.
What's Casey's number?
29 to 1 on FanDuel. JT is 18 to 1 on DraftKings.
I like Casey. I'm going to co-sign on that one.
Okay, I like it. You left out
The actual winner?
250 to 1.
Oh,
God. Jim Herman.
KH Lee.
Oh,
The
yeah.
guy competes. This is the question. If you're going to give me 250 to 1 with the KH Lee at this event, I'll throw $1.
Everyone put $1 on that.
Put $1 on
It's
that.
a must. You have to.
Yeah, that's true. You got to do that.
He's
All
gonna
right,
compete.
I'm in.
He's going to compete. We're gonna throw 250 to 1. That's a lot, and it's probably what it should be, to be honest, because he's not nearly as good as most of the guys in this field. But he plays well on these courses, and that's what matters. Now, in terms of getting back to reality, if you want to throw maybe, I do like Hatton at 55 to 1. I think that's really interesting. I like Cup Crack at 60 to 1. But my pick to win this week, and it's not the biggest number, but 25 to 1. I'm going to go with Victor Hovland.
All right. I like that.
Now we go to the real moneymaker, the first round leader. Nick, who do you got?
Yeah, that was Sergio, 60 to 1. My bad. I got to pay attention more.
I like it. Sia, who are you looking at for the first round leader?
All right. I think my breaking news is going to go like way off the range here. Okay. So I wrote down 5. I'll give you the 4 and then I'll tell you the breaking news, but I'll cut down the breaking news a little bit. Don't worry, guys. Corey Connors, 45 to 1. Jason Kokrak, 50 to 1. Actually, I have Sergio down here at 60 to 1. I don't know that I think he can do it for 4 rounds, but he can definitely do it for 1. Jim Herman, 130 to 1. We've talked about him earlier in the show. My breaking news, the guy who's actually going to be the first round leader come Thursday afternoon, Thursday evening, it's none other than a guy that's 75 to 1 and just hasn't been good lately, which is why he's 75 to 1. But his stats aren't terrible, and I like the number, and I am president of his fan club. So I have to go with none other than Ryan Palmer. He will be your first round leader Thursday evening, 75 to 1. You're welcome, America.
I like it. I like Ryan Palmer. I think that's somebody I had my eye on. I have two first round leader plays. The one I'm going to throw out, I think if he can carry some momentum over from the last tournament's Cameron Champ at 65 to 1, maybe a first round kind of explosion. I don't think he'll last for 4 days, but my favorite first round leader play is 80 to 1. We're getting Max Homa. I just think that's too good of a number for him. He can come out and have a hot first day. So I like Homa at 80 to 1.
I'm in. Co-sign on that one too. I'm adding Casey and I'm adding Homa to my card.
I love it. Guys, we just gave you the keys to make a ton of money this week. Just go follow them and then come back next week and tell us how rich we all got. Good luck, everyone. Any final words from you, Nick?
No, go White Sox. That's it. Oh, no, not yet.
Maybe Joe 3 Smith should have the final word here. Big fan, longtime listener, brand new owner of a Win Daily membership. He probably watched us on SiriusXM and chimed in on the tweets, which we put out and lately been giving free memberships out. Keep up the good work, fellas. Very much appreciated. And then we have Andrew here. We love the accolades. We'll always put them on the screen, and we want everybody to win. That's the bottom line, honestly.
I love it, guys. Listen.
Just wait for NFL. Can I pump up NFL because it's gonna be badass. We got good stuff dropping that I'm working on. That's why I'm not really in the golf stuff as much right now. But it's gonna be fun.
What are you working on?
Just it's like a stack value ranking. So I found all of the historical data on DraftKings and FanDuel outputs and their pricing. So I'm doing like a back study on what is actually the best value stack so you could afford the best optimal lineup. So like a lot of people just week one, they're going to go Mahomes, Kelsey, Tyreek, and then have shit to do. But a lot of the times it was the most valuable stack to afford the optimal lineup outside of that was like Herbert and Keenan Allen. So, and just guys like that, people that are like mid-price like that. So we'll have based on the 80-mile projections, a stack value rank on the website to say like, you know what, sure, the output of Kelsey Mahomes is projected higher, but the value overall points per dollar, because basically if you're not stacking, you should always stack. Like if you're playing a quarterback that's not Lamar Jackson, let's say, you need to be stacking him with his number one target, unless it's like a Joe Burrow when, everybody's going to have a 15 to 20% target share in Jamar Chase, Tyler Boyd, Higgins. You get it. Now we're talking too much football. You got
Let me ask you a quick question. I have a question about stacking.
Sure. Yeah.
Do you only stack one receiver? Will you stack two receivers? What do your stacks look like?
It depends on the offense. So it all depends on the target share. Like last year with Seattle and the year before with Seattle, the targets were only going to Tyler Lockett and only going to DK Metcalf. So that was an easy one to do double, because when Russell, and it's a lot of the back testing too, and I could share this data on Discord, but when Russell had his best games, both those guys went off. When Herbert had his best games, it wasn't like a combo thing of like Jalen Guyton went off and Mike Williams, my boy, Hunter Henry. Like the guys that were mostly stacked in doubles with, I'm just doing a lot of Charger stuff right now, with Justin Herbert, it was usually a double stack of Keenan Allen and Hunter Henry didn't hit value. So it all depends on like the offense and how they spread out the ball, and if you know their system, and I'll do a write-up on every system too. So it's a busy month for me, but it's a lot of cool stuff that we'll have. It'll just be like a stacked value rank. We got to find a better name for it on the NFL tab, but it should be shown on right before week one, maybe a week before week one, maybe 10 days before. We'll see, but that will be very cool. And there'll be like little data behind it to be like, optimal Russ Wilson, go Lockett and Metcalf or whatever the case may be. But yeah, short answer, I usually just do one, but it depends on the offense. Like this year, I'm expecting Mecole Hardman to have such a good role, and he's way too cheap week one, so you could certainly double stack, hell, even triple stack with Kelsey, because all that offense does is throw the football. So,
well, I think what's interesting and what I want to just highlight is this is the type of stuff that makes a difference, especially in NFL, right? Most websites are going to tell you this team's corner's hurt, play that receiver. That's it, right? And everyone can see that, and that's not going to get you right. We want to find the difference. Of course, everyone's going to play Mahomes. So how do we know what the value is in finding, really statistically, we should play the guy $3,000 cheaper who has the better matchup and then stack his team, right? And that's how you make a difference and make yourself some money in the NFL. So that's awesome.
There's so many examples of that. And just back to your question to Nick, I mean, you might have a game like the Chiefs versus the Bills, which I think might have happened last year, early in the season, where I actually had, what was it? No, it was the Cardinals and the Bills, I think. I actually had DeAndre Hopkins, I had Kyler Murray, but I also had Christian Kirk, and then I had two guys on the way back. And so instead of chasing a bunch of points in 3 or 4 different football games, I really concentrated 5, which is, half of my lineup, more than half my lineup, on just that game, because my assumption was that game's just going to get out of control. I'm pretty sure that was the game where Hopkins caught the pass at the game-winning catch that Kyler Murray flung up there. And that throw and catch vaulted me up to second place in this huge single entry tournament. My point is if you can find that game, it's not necessarily just about stacking the quarterback with the receiver and bringing it back with one guy. Add a couple more guys to that. If you got wide receiver 2 there or a tight end on the other side that you're running back that you like, that you think is going to get targets and carries, you're golden. You found the game.
Yeah. And like week 3, for example, this is again value stacks and stuff like that. The Panthers are going to Houston to play the Texans. There's no bye weeks, so ownership won't be crazy high. But if like Sam Darnold's 5,600 because he has to play the Jets, that game's probably going to be really low paced. I don't know what to expect with Zach Wilson and the new head coaching staff in New York, but then they go to the Saints. They're probably going to get throttled, and that'll be a slow-paced game as well. So maybe, Darnold's probably should be below 6K in week 3, and there's no buys, so it's a full slate, and the Texans' pass defense is awful. I could probably start at cornerback, and I only got one knee. But that's, maybe you go Darnold, DJ Moore, Robbie Anderson, and you could probably put McCaffrey in there or just go 2 of the 3 and absolutely go wild, and then get someone, Brandon Cooks on the other side or whatever you want to do. If you believe in 4K price, David Johnson. A lot of cool stuff. And then you go get Kelsey because you can afford him now. And then you could get, you could pay McCaffrey. Like, that's value stacking, and that's like what this back test is showing. And, I said it last year in week 16, when in the NFL, the best stack of that week was using Brandon Allen for Cincinnati. And the guy I think was the number 3 overall quarterback, but like points per dollar about like tenfold anybody else. So stuff like that, you can get a big time edge because you could afford the Kelce's, Mahomes, and all that, and not having shit running backs because you need volume at those main positions. So finding the value stacks are going to be important. And I knew it all along, but I wasn't necessarily sharing that in a visual way with Win Daily, so I had to figure something out this offseason. So that's what I'm doing right now.
I was going to say, Nick is so far ahead of everyone that he's
I already got my week 3 lineup built.
He's anticipating players.
I just need to know what the prices are
in week 1 and 2, so they'll be low owned by week 3, so he can hammer them home. And that's amazing. That is next level now.
He already has his lineups built for week 3, and he's probably not really being facetious there. Like, he pretty much knows exactly where he's going, and that's just, I love it. I mean, we could talk about NFL for the next like 12 hours straight.
Yeah, you guys want to keep going to like midnight?
Well, do we want to? Yes. Unfortunately, I have to go to Bermuda and check out the grass. So,
hey, yeah, have a good time.
Good luck, everyone. Another successful show. We're gonna have a successful week. I will see you next Tuesday. Let me know how much money you won. And see ya.
So there's just, I totally forgot. One more thing. Oh man, this is embarrassing.